All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board, for the board. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to episode 61 of the KissFAQ podcast. I'm Julian Gill, one of your hosts, and joining me today is Lonnie. And thank you very much, Lonnie, for filling in for me for the past 2 weeks when I've been playing hooky.
Sorry for the disaster.
And Ken, 69th Blizzard on the board. And today joining us, and it should give you a little bit of a suggestion about what our topic's going to be, is author of Shout It Out Loud, James Campion. Welcome back, James. We had you on the show a while ago when your book, I think, first came out, but we want you back to be a part of this panel while we talk about the 40th anniversary of the album. Now, you've had a little bit of a life-changing event, and it's under your head, I believe, or under your hat.
Yes.
So
what's going on?
What's going on here? Because you're looking a little bit different from the last time we saw you.
Yeah, well, just real quick, I don't want to bring anybody down, but my sister-in-law has stage 2 breast cancer, and in solidarity, I started to shave my head, and then my great assistant, Danielle, said, why don't we take photographs of that and Instagram and everything for your fans or whatever you might call them, and I said, great. And I said, we got to make some hay of this. We can't just do it for fun. So I started looking into charities, and then I found out, wow, how much money above and beyond medical care families that go through this have to pay now that it's hit our family directly. And, a lot of health insurance is only covered about 80%. And when you start talking about the 50s and 60s and 70s, $100,000 of care. So I decided to set up a GoFundMe site to kind of support her. So I'm not going to give the direct link away now. I'm not going to remember it. But if you go to jamescampion.com, it's the first thing on there. And if you want to give $5, $10, anything, it certainly helps. So, Julian, thank you for asking. I really appreciate it.
No, that's really cool. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us are going to be touched or have been touched by someone with cancer. And, anything we can do to play it forward to someone else who's undergoing the battle is an awesome thing. But I'll put in the link to your site and to the fundraiser, when I put this together. Because, and here, prayers and positive vibes. Everyone out there, you can't give a buck, send some positive energy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all you guys. Thanks.
So let's jump into our topic, and it is, of course, the 40th anniversary. And James, I'm going to just hit you straight up. 40 years of Destroyer. I mean, what is your immediate take on that, other than holy shit?
I'm old. Really, really old. It's not just the beard that's great. I will say this, though. I don't know how you guys feel. I am sure the elder statesman here. But it's very hard to believe that it has been 40 years. And I picked it up somewhere in June of that year that I ended up getting Destroyer after getting Kiss Alive for my 8th grade graduation. And of course, Destroyer had already been out. I had to have it. And just that cover, everything I read about in the book, just holding that cover and the vinyl and that big KISS in the orange and yellow, and then the lyrics to Detroit Rock City, and putting that needle on and listening to that wonderful opening. I just can't believe that much time has gone past. And it's interesting, though, as much as I say that retrospectively, you could really see the time pass. For a while there, and I think maybe you guys haven't had this, but I had it. Big Kiss fan as a kid. Then it kind of faded, got into other bands, got into other things, became a writer, wrote about other things, and became a music journalist. And then, and every once in a while, Kiss would come back in the transom, and I have to remember, and I'd always defend them in some way. And then 5 years ago, it's coming up now, late 2011, I think, I pitched the original idea of doing a book about it. And once I dove into it, all those memories rushed back. So it was almost like it was yesterday, living with that book for the last 3 or 4 years, 3 years in researching and writing it, and then a year for Backbeat to kind of get it, and us to get source material and the rights to the lyrics and the rights for the photographs, that it was quite an odyssey, no pun intended, Julian, and I was trying to get in to that mode, and I did it immediately. The memories are so fresh, and I don't know what you guys think, but it's the album that really changed a lot of people's lives. It's quoted a lot in my book. I've done interviews with Eddie Trunk and Scott Ian from Anthrax, and a lot of people said, if I didn't pick that record up, maybe I wouldn't have a business. I wouldn't be in a rock band. I wouldn't do radio shows. And you too, Julian, I think when we first talked about it, you said how much it affected you. So that's my immediate memory and reaction to Destroyer and what it meant to me.
Ken, how about you?
Well, for me, my first real knowing of Destroyer was after I got, I think, double platinum first. It was after Alive 2, and then I got double platinum to kind of get, in tune with what, Kiss has released. prior to Live 2. And I know off of Live 2, I loved songs like Detroit Rock City and Shout It Out Loud. Those are God of Thunder. Those are all fantastic. I loved listening to them on Live 2. So I was slowly going back and like, well, this one has a lot of the songs that off Live 2. Yeah, I think I should probably get that. So I know it was one of the early ones I got. Probably, I'm gonna say I probably got it in '78 though. Um, and it just, the cover, like you guys say, the cover is just awesome. It's superhero thing. I was into, and still am into Batman, and I was into comic books and exactly, and so that was just like, okay, this is just right up my alley, and the superhero thing, and then putting it on. Um, it was interesting because I was so used to the Live 2 version, for instance, of Detroit Rock City, and then I had this opening part. It sounds like you have their radio announcer and what's the stuff going on here. But it was interesting, and I thought it just all flowed nicely. Plus, I listened to it today, uh, and it just flows beautifully from one song to the next, and it's just a good solid album. So it ranks high with me. Top, I don't know,
It's the best concept
6.
album Kiss ever made, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Well,
I mean, if you want to call it a concept, I mean,
right. I tried to thread that, and since I did the book, and people have been asking me questions. I was on with a bunch of guys on a metal radio show on Saturday night, and they were saying, when I was a kid, I figured that too. The guy's driving in the car and he crashes, and then he goes to hell, and there's Gene Simmons, and then he's raised up to heaven with the choir. And I thought, wow, I didn't even go there. So other people have kind of connected the dots that way too. It's not really technically a concept album, but yeah, I can see that.
But there's a theme that kind of undulates through the thematic album, I guess.
Right.
Lonnie, now like me, I mean, we didn't get into the band until a little bit later than these chaps. So obviously, your story is going to be a little bit different than mine, being '80s.
Yeah, well, my story too, though, is Destroyer was actually, it's very special to me because Destroyer is actually my introduction to the band. It was the first album that my brother had, and that's what turned me on to Kiss, was hearing Destroyer. So we didn't have the album. We had, because remember it says the '80s, so of course we had the audio cassette of Destroyer. So of course that great image of the band just doesn't resonate as well on that small cassette. And remember on the cassettes too, it was only like half the cassette because the bottom half of the cover was like credits and things like that. You know what I mean? So it was very, very, very small image of the band that I was seeing, but the album, we wore that tape out together between the two of us. We just wore it out to the point where I still have it. I mean, he gave it to me because I turned into the bigger Kiss fan as time went on. I still have it, but it won't play. But I have it just because it was my introduction to the band. And I remember hearing that, being very young, hearing that, maybe 5 years old, maybe 6, I don't know, really young, hearing that, and it resonated with me very quickly, and stuck with me for a long time. So we had that, and then the second album he got was Creatures of the Night, and those two albums were my introduction to the band. But Destroyer was the original one we had, and it hit home for me right away. And James, you were talking earlier about how when you became a Kiss fan, you might have been really strong on it at first, and then you get into other bands and that. And for me, that's what happened. I got into other bands like Guns N' Roses and things like that. But then everybody who watches the shows know that come '92, I was just head over heels in love with Kiss again with another Bob Ezrin record. So, although I didn't get Destroyer in '76 like James did, or I didn't get it shortly thereafter like Ken did, Destroyer was very special to me very early on, and still is to this day.
Yeah, a lot of people look at it as the gateway. But I was going to ask all you guys, does everybody here comic book fans? Were they all, when you were kids? I mean, that seems to be the American boy story.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was a big Spider-Man
Comic books
guy.
exist.
I loved horror comics, like creepy and eerie, which is perfect because Ken Kelly, did covers for that. I loved, like I said, Spider-Man. I was into the the Planet of the Apes comics in the '70s. So that was a nice transition. I was wondering if that was the same kind of transition. Horror movies, sci-fi, and all that kind of stuff that Kiss kind of tickled that little thing in us that made us, more attached to it. It wasn't just the music. Everybody was says, oh, they ignore the music, but as I write in the book, the image is a huge part, and people have to stop ignoring that. That was a big part, and we just lost Bowie, and I'm so glad now. I've done a couple of bookstore presentations, and I always start with Bowie, because he created these characters, and then he was able to strip the characters away and go to another character, almost saying, oh, that was so 1972. Kiss wore it on their faces and kept it going. So you felt like you were a part of this movement. I mean, that's why the Kiss Army thing resonates so well. So I think the image part should not ever, going from the comic book thing, should never be forgotten and limited. I think there's a way you can intellectually defend the band, and I think that's a huge part of them. I love that part, and I don't know what you guys feel about that.
Yeah, comic books, I gotta say, I was never into comic books, other than, I don't know, I've only ever owned one comic book, and that was...
What? That is crazy. Cool.
In addition to the Kiss ones, but Fat Freddy's,
yes, of course,
Freddy's Cat, for anyone who's out there into obscure comics. So I never got it from that level, but I get the superhero side, and that's the thing that resonated with me when I first saw that cover. And I mean... Lonnie's kind of touched on that wow, it's superheroes, it's larger than life, it's it's greater than the sum, I guess. I don't even remember when I first really experienced Destroyer, but one thing that still sticks with me to this day is the sound. It's not just a collection of songs, it's a complete thing. It's the sonics all the way through. It's so unified. It sounds just so balanced. Whether you're listening to Great Expectations or Detroit Rock City, the clarity of the sonics is just unbelievable for me. But let's get into another question on this. What to you makes this Kiss's greatest studio album? Because obviously it is the only album that is officially double platinum certified in the band's studio catalog. Smashes Thrashes is also, I believe, double platinum, and Alive 2, and that is it for the official multi-platinum certifications for the band, even though we know that everything else in the 70s is at least double platinum. So, James, back to you. What makes it the greatest album in the band's catalog? I mean, it's the big 4-0 here for the album. It's the one that you really got to celebrate. What makes it great for you?
Well, I think sonically, as you mentioned, it just blows the earlier ones away. And it really, for a lot of fans at that time, including me, it sort of signified our belief that we got with Alive, that this was a big, giant monolith that was coming and you couldn't stop it. But also the imagination of the lyrics and the sounds of the songs. I argue in my book that before Destroyer, there really wasn't any of this connection of the image. They wrote songs, some of the songs, but for the most part, the songs about girls or drinking and this was, they have Greek mythology in here. They've got references to S&M and references to dying in a car. There's all these different things that I love, the youth of it. But I think also getting it down to the bare knuckles about why it's double platinum. Let's face it, the songs, because this is getting away from the image. I mean, they still play all these songs today. Detroit Rock City, King of the Nighttime World, God of Thunder is Gene's song. Beth is still their highest ranking single. It's still it's in a Volkswagen commercial now, which probably is driving the sales up. I know it helped my book for certain. Shout It Out Loud. They used it to kick off their 96 tour. Do You Love Me? They played it on all those, the acoustic tours. So to me, out of any other record except for the first record, it seems to have, transcended their career. And again, the final thing I would say is that, and again, not to tout the book, but I spent so much time on it and I had a thesis and I drove it home, I think, is that was the seminal moment for them. I use that word a lot because they were teetering on. Are they going to be some 70s rock oddity that people just say, hey, remember that band Kiss that painted their face? Or something that became this giant, and it wasn't just Destroyer. It was getting, Howard Marks involved, and the Bootwell, whatever how you pronounce it, the company that got all the merchandising, and they took off from this thing to a whole other thing entirely. And I think that that's why people have such a fond memory, or they think of it as like this seminal moment in history. So I think all those things put together. I don't know if I covered too much or hit some of the bells, but that's my feeling.
You're just missing the kitchen sink, I think. Ken,
Yeah.
what for you makes it a great album? Whether it's the greatest album in the Kiss catalog's open to debate, to a certain extent. But
Paul and Gene always, talk about it as the one that's going to be, that they try to emulate, on future releases or try to copy or sound like. But it's the whole package. The studio album before was Dressed to Kill. They were in suits and things like that. That's not superhero-ish. Though, if they would have done that right as originally they intended, coming out of a phone booth and becoming superheroes in that one photo shoot, that would have made more sense on the album. It probably would have, even brought more sales. But alive, that was getting closer. The great image of them live on stage. So. And here it is. This is, for me, comic book meets rock world. And you have also the first showing of the Kiss Army logo. That's all part of it. The whole package, the front, back cover, the colors, the inside packaging, and then the whole album itself, the way it flowed. And I like what James. I was reading when I read James' book about the part where they were kind of short on time on like side 1 or side 2, right? It has to be a certain like 35 minutes or something total,
Least,
or somewhere around there, right? So it was interesting that then they kind of say, "Oh, we got to do something here," and they added that the beginning and the ending part. But yes, it's the whole sound, the whole package. To me, makes it the ultimate Kiss album, package wise and song wise. And like you said, James, about they use all these songs, almost all of the songs on this album are being used today in concert or whatever.
I think it's the only Kiss album that all of the songs have been played live. I could be wrong about that. Julian, help me out, or one of you guys.
You're wrong.
Yeah,
sorry.
they did. Okay, was it the first album?
First album.
First album?
Second album.
They played Love Theme from Kiss live?
Acrobat.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. Very good before they recorded it. Yeah, that's a good point.
And they played it on the first tour. So, we got Lafayette Music Room, I think, has a live recording of it, as does the Bayou. So,
right.
There's
but is there any other album that they played all the songs? I know they played Sweet Pain like 3 times.
Yeah, Hotter Than Hell, they played Olive, and Dressed to Kill. So
really?
Yeah, they played all of them.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, Lover All I Can they play. Well, I guess they must have played it
Cruise.
later on.
And
the Cruise.
Very first Kiss show.
But if you talk about how many times they've played certain songs in concert, I'd say that you get the majority is going to be off of Destroyer.
Yeah, Destroyer was the first one I think to get to 100% legitimately. Oh, actually, no, it wouldn't have been. So, scratch that. But because of Great Expectations, obviously wasn't done until Symphony.
Right, that's when I thought all of them were. Yeah.
So the first album was done before then. But there's out of a band that's got how many studio albums? It's impressive that any of the albums get to 100%, especially nowadays. So it's always nice when they go back and fill in. I completely lost my train of thought with that segue. Pardon me, that tangent.
I think Lonnie had to go on the whole transition from the comic book thing.
What Ken was talking about, how what makes it so special to him, is that I remember, Ken, you brought up the fact that it's so short and it's like 35 minutes long, and I remember I was listening to an interview on Howard Stern one day, and Rob Zombie was his guest, and Rob was talking about his new album coming out, Educated Horses, and he was discussing about how it's a short album, that it wasn't long time frame wise. He said, but he's talking to Howard about how it doesn't have to be real long to be epic, because if you can cram it into a certain time frame, long doesn't necessarily mean great. I mean, look at Hot in the Shade. A long album doesn't necessarily make it a great album, but if you value quality over the quantity, and you make these 9 songs that are on there, what those 9 songs are. It's fantastic. And he goes to Howard, he goes, listen to Kiss's Destroyer. That thing's only 35 minutes, but it's epic. And Howard's not a big Kiss fan at all. And he's like, yeah. It's really funny.
I think there's this cliche in the rock and roll world at all killer, no filler. And I think that perfectly applies to this song, with perhaps the exception of Sweet Pain.
I'm one of the few people who really like Sweet Pain. Why am I the only person that like? You're like the millionth person who's told me
I like
that.
Sweet Pain.
I mean, I like the sound.
It's probably the weakest song on the record.
But it feels the most unfinished. It feels like the one that they just never got around to Bob Ezrin getting a co-write on making it perfect.
I've talked about how like Daniel and I always say, the God Gave Rock and Roll to You doesn't really fit well on Revenge. You could say that about Sweet Pain, that it doesn't resonate the way the other songs do, and it doesn't maybe fit in with the other 8 songs on the album.
And it's a shame, too, because I love the opening riff to that. It's such a great opening riff. That keyboard that he put in there, it's just so epic in that sense. It's almost like too bad that it's sandwiched in with all these other great songs. And it kind of, I think it's overshadowed a little bit. But maybe if it was on, I don't know, Rock and Roll Over. Because I was going to throw this point in. Because Lonnie mentioned, I became a Kiss fan, and then it kind of went off to another level. For me, it kind of almost immediately dove off the charts for me, because I was really disappointed with Rock and Roll Over. I get a lot of guff for that. A lot of people like it much better than Destroyer. I know people feel it's too fluffy. Destroyer, it's got the ballad, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't really Kiss. They finally got back to real Kiss. It's Rock and Roll Over is like a favorite of a lot of fans. But at that time as a kid, I wanted another big epic with sound effects and God of Thunder, and I got, it was a nice album, but I just thought it paled comparison, so I kind of faded. Then I was getting into my later teen years where I was discovering other bands, and Kiss kind of became like my middle school band, and then I was able to grab it later on. I came back around with, strangely enough, Music from the Elder, but it just seems that it went quickly for me because Rock and Roll Over was such a departure from Destroyer, because that's my departure. It must have been a big departure for those guys who grew up listening to the first 3 albums. My beginning was Destroyer, so when Rock and Roll Over came out, I got disappointed.
You're the only one, I think, that had a departure after Destroyer, and Rock and Roll Over turned them on.
I am. Yeah, really. I am. It's amazing because I write about how it catapulted them.
I've never heard someone say that before.
Yeah, it was, for me, I was really disappointed. And because, and I know why they did it now. They ran and tried to put it out quickly because they were afraid. They didn't realize Beth was going to take off, because they ended up playing all the Destroyer songs on the Paul Lynde special. And by that point, Rock and Roll Over had already been out. They'd been touring it. But to me, they rushed it out. I remember it went from my summer of my graduation year, from 8th grade into high school. And you know that transition, right? So you get into high school and people are beating you up because you like Kiss. Yeah, and so then here comes Kiss. I'm like, oh, great, a new Kiss album. I'm like, oh, I don't think I should be beaten up for this. I think it was tougher for me to defend my Kissdom at that point. So yeah, maybe I'm the only person who feels that way, but that was me, my personal experience, how I was growing up and what Destroyer meant to me. And I was really I wasn't done with Destroyer. I wanted more of that. And like literally it felt like 3 months later, Rock and Roll Over came out, and it just didn't have the sonic quality for me.
So do you think Destroyer scared Kiss?
It definitely did, yeah.
Because for at least until 81, they never went anywhere near that sort of sound again in terms of what they did to stretch themselves. And that kind of leads into the next question. Who do you think is the MVP of Destroyer? And Ken, I'm going to throw this one to you first. It can be in the band, it can be outside of the band, but who's the MVP for you on the album?
No, without a doubt, to me, it's Bob Ezrin. Just for his input, his songwriting, his ideas, and his bringing the best out of Kiss, out of Peter's drumming. Their musicianship has just elevated so quickly in that, from Alive, or if you look back at just to Kill to Destroyer. Wow, they're doing a lot of different things with the music here, changing keys and so on. So it's Bob Ezrin. I mean, without his production, I can't see, they may have, I just imagined, today I was thinking about it, what if Eddie Kramer produced Destroyer? It'd be a total different thing. And maybe the songs like Detroit Rock City would become kind of unfinished in a way. Um, classics. That middle part, the middle part solo part, that I that wouldn't be there. That's something Bob came up with. So it's Bob Ezrin. I mean, without a doubt, as the most valuable, you know, person, and for Destroyer.
I mean, it's kind of hard to argue that point, no matter what you consider. I think most people by this point have heard the August '75 demos that leaked out to the wider public a couple of years ago, and obviously on the box set, people got to hear Paul's happy clappy God of Thunder take. When it's his beast, and it can't be called a beast. Sorry, bad word to use there. And his original demo of Detroit Rock City, vastly different in character, even though the elements are all there. It really takes a sculptor, and I guess we can call Bob the sonic sculptor, to really mold that into something that's not ordinary, but special. So, it's kind of hard to debate, Ezrin getting the most out of every single one of those guys, whether it's Peter, whether it's Ace. We hear the stories of him kind of singing Ace the solo for one of the songs. What was it, Detroit Rock City? Or helping Peter deal with some difficult time signatures to be working with. I mean, one of the songs I think is mentioned in 7/8 time, which I'm not a musician, so that doesn't mean anything to me, but it sounds difficult. Odd number and an even number. So, James, is it Ezrin, or do you see someone else on the team who really takes it to the special level?
Well, I would definitely concur with that. I mean, half my book's about Bob, and that was one of the motivations to go into it, to meet Bob and talk to him. And he gave me hours of his time, and we still email from time to time about stuff. Recently, there was this Kanye West thing for some weird reason. He got pulled into the news. But yeah, without a doubt, I mean, certainly I'm on record as saying it. But just to throw in a little thing, be a little different here, because again, to echo what you were saying before as well, is that you don't have Detroit Rock City, the middle part. You certainly don't get King of the Nighttime World. He brought that in from hearing it from the Hollywood Stars. You don't get Gene singing God of Thunder. You don't get the choir or the stuff on Great Expectations. There is no Beth. There is no Flaming Youth, which he got everybody together to do. There is no Do You Love Me, because he wrote that basically with Kim Fowley and Paul Stanley. And there's no Shout It Out Loud, which they all wrote in his apartment. So like 9/10 of the record is Bob. But to be a little different, also to echo something like Julian said the first time we talked about it, was I think Peter Criss needs a lot of props here. First of all, he never played drums better than this, ever. And he admits it. Till his fingers literally were bleeding. He was jamming his hand in ice buckets. To the point where it literally almost drove him insane. But also Beth. Let's give it up for him for that. I mean, it was a tough spot to be in. Paul and Gene didn't want it on the record. He just kind of sang it a cappella. Bob got this warbly, tape, which you can hear on YouTube, which I, kind of describe in the book. And then he turns it into this beautiful aria. So, and he had to sing this song all by himself. I mean, this is the first ballad. I mean, a real true ballad where it's almost like, it's exactly like, in fact, Eleanor Rigby. There's nothing going on there except for the strings and piano. So really gutsy thing. Maybe his finest hour in Kiss. So I think Peter deserves a lot of props there.
Oh, I mean, I don't think you can ignore Peter at all. I mean, I'll put him up there with Ezrin because of how far. I mean, he bled for the band. He was probably the least musically skilled of the four original members of the band. No formal training whatsoever, very much drums from the heart rather than actually knowing what he may be doing. I mean, someone could tell him what he's doing in terms of a pattern or a rhythm or whatever, but he wouldn't know what you were talking about at that point. So he really makes a gigantic difference. But I don't think that would have happened without Ezra, and so you got to give it up to them. I mean, when you look at the charting of this album, it hits number 11 in May, long before Beth is even thought of as a B-side. That's purely on the strength of Alive that it has its first run. And then it's got its staying power because of Beth. And that's where the sales really come from, I think. Is the solid week-to-week charting rather than August it's off the charts. So I like the thought of Peter Criss because of what he does on the album. Lonnie, what are your thoughts on Tough to be the last guy on that topic.
When Ken was talking about Ezra being the MVP of the album, it's hard to argue with Bob being the MVP. I mean, James talked about, him being responsible for basically 90% of what's on there. But if you were going to go to me second, I would have said Peter just to be different, because Peter's drumming is you said it, it's the best it ever was on that album. Peter was playing, and it was also when Peter was playing very well on the Alive tour. Peter had really hit his peak as a drummer about 75, 76, and you listen to some of those bootlegs from 77, 78, you can already begin to hear some of the decline in Peter's drumming even before you get to the Dynasty tour. You can start to hear it on the Love Gun and Alive 2 tour. But Peter had really come into his own as a drummer prior to the Destroyer sessions, and then Bob pushed him to another level that I don't think Peter knew was possible, or Gene, Paul, and Ace knew was possible for their drummer. And you read a lot of things that they, thought of Peter almost as Julian, and Julian, you mentioned, as maybe the weakest link in the band musicianship-wise. But what their drummer achieved on that album, between not only from his drumming, but from what James said, with Beth, it's Peter Criss's crowning moment for his whole, maybe outside the birth of his child, the crowning moment for his whole life is Destroyer, what he did on that record. It's cover to cover. Peter Criss, if you're going to choose one of the four as an MVP of the album, I think you absolutely have to choose Peter.
Yeah, and if I may, just to piggyback on what Lonnie was saying, I think it's unfair to say he's the least. I mean, I would say that probably might be true, but if he's the only guy on Alive that's not overdubbed. Almost all of those drums, if not all of them, are, and I absolutely, and that's one thing that I missed in the book. I think I just touched upon it, but I didn't say that he was really at his peak. It's almost like he came into this album on a roll, no pun intended, and he really grasped that. And Bob did push him, but I think his work on Alive is one of the best live drumming I've heard any band do. And this is not coming from a total Kiss fanatic. You guys are, but I think Peter Criss is, to this day, I could still play that drum solo, with pencils or something like I did on the desk as a kid. It's just so memorable and so great. And his drumming on Black Diamond, and his singing on Nothing to Lose. That's those two albums in a row, which are arguably the best things Kiss ever did, is Peter Criss really shining. So if I may, he really did come into his own those 2 years, no doubt about it.
And I gotta say, I can listen to any Alive bootleg any day of the week. And just, from that tour, I mean, the whole band is on fire.
They really are.
But Peter is so solid. And what are the drums and the bass in a band? The backbeat, the backbone. So, that's right, just to not only say that he was fantastic on Destroyer. But I'm just looking at these Magna Graphics demos. And I mean, what would Destroyer have been without Bob Ezrin? I mean, don't you hesitate? I mean, everyone's heard that on the box set. I mean, is that magical? Apart from it being, it ain't the smoke.
Right. Or Mad Dog. There would have just been Bad Dog instead of him putting that great riff in the middle of Flaming Youth.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Love Is All Right, which I've got to say is one of the worst song titles I've ever heard. Love is all
it's
right.
All right.
It's all right.
Shucks.
It's all right.
Something to get excited about.
And what is this version 956 of Bad Bad Loving?
Yeah.
Man of a Thousand Faces. Well, that's
Right.
that's a really cool track. And Don't Want Your Romance, Burning Up with Fever, Rock and Rolls Royce. I mean, bits and pieces of these songs come out on Destroyer. They come out. I think it's Night Fly. Becomes the riff becomes Sweet Pain, or one of them. And I don't know off the top of my head.
That's exactly right. There's two songs, Night Fly, and there's one other one that became Sweet Pain.
I'm a Star. And Howling for Your Love. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff from a demo perspective, but Paul Stanley's really said it perfectly in that, there's a reason why they don't release demos. And,
right.
A lot of these are are good illustrations of that point, because without the polishing, they're just rocks in essence. So, let's get into a few of the songs here, and I really want to start with Sweet Pain, just because it's my least favorite. Does it have any redeeming qualities? apart from perhaps it being misplaced on the album in terms of its location. Lonnie, am I being harsh?
No, I think "Sweet Pain" is probably my least favorite song on the album, but I understand other people love it though. At the same time, I'm not. I think there's great qualities in it as well. We saw Kiss. My brother and I saw Kiss at Sault Ste. Marie back in 2007, and I don't know if you guys remember or not. That's when they had a poll on their website. You could vote for what rarity you wanted Kiss to play at those shows. And my brother voted for "Sweet Pain" on that list. He goes, "Oh, how sweet would that be, Sweet Pain?" And I think, and it goes back to what I was saying before. It goes back to he saw a song off Destroyer, and just like for me, that was our introduction to Kiss. So he saw a song off of Destroyer, a rare song off the Destroyer. Oh, that's his immediate choice because of where he was, what it meant to him at the time. But "Sweet Pain" it sounds like it belongs, and I think James made a great point. I think it sounds like it belongs on "Rock and Roll Over" almost, because it's more about what Kiss typically sings about, and not what a lot of the songs on Destroyer are about.
Fair point. That's good.
So it's the only song of its kind on Destroyer, as opposed to what you hear on "Dress to Kill" and what you hear on "Rock and Roll Over." So, but I'm not going to criticize. Destroyer's really close to my heart, like Revenge is. I'm not going to really sit here and criticize anything on Destroyer, and I don't think James will either. So, so if you're looking for me to criticize, maybe you need to go to Ken.
No, it's about being objective. So, "Sweet Pain," I mean, they've pulled out "Love 'Em and Leave 'Em" in recent years, and going back to 2006 as well as one of the rarities that they've thrown out there electrically. Would you like to hear "Sweet Pain" in concert?
Yes.
Yeah, would you take it?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Over "Love 'Em, Leave 'Em"? Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. And by the way, there's like a bootleg.
Over "Love Gun" and
Yeah, there's a few. There's a bootleg of them playing it acoustically somewhere on YouTube, and I just saw it a couple of days ago, in fact. And the whole crowd starts singing it because Gene's like, "I don't know the words," and I just listened to the crowd singing it, and it sounded really. The melody sounded better. Gene's not really singing in that song. He's kind of doing a Lou Reedy thing. And I kind of brought it up to Bob because Bob had worked with Lou on Berlin and told him to talk the lyrics. And Gene wanted to write a song that didn't really fight with the riff, that just sang along with the riff. So I think actually Gene doesn't do it its justice. I think the song could actually be done better if someone covered it. I really do. I think the song's not really given its full, as you said, Julian, it's not given its full Bob Ezrin or a production quality.
Okay, so someone who can talk it. Hey, Kanye, got a song for you.
Only if Ezrin produces it.
Yeah, got to be produced by Bob. Ken,
Exactly.
thoughts on "Sweet Pain"?
While that song doesn't fit the theme, I guess, like Lonnie has mentioned, I still enjoy. I enjoyed it first time I heard it, and this is the one where Dick Wagner, right, is playing the lead guitar on that one, right? So I like it better than I have the Resurrected and with the Ace solo, and maybe I'm just exactly, and I like the Dick Wagner one better. I like that solo, maybe because I've heard it a million times and it stuck in my head, that solo. But I think it was still better that way, and it was the right choice for Bob Ezrin to bring him in. So the song, I enjoy it. It's good. It doesn't fit maybe with all the other types of subject that's going on Destroyer, but it's a good song in my opinion.
I've got a little show and tell here. I don't know how well it's going to show up, but I was looking at some documents today in one of my binders, and I've got the union cut sheet for "Sweet Pain."
Oh, wow, cool.
The most, I mean, it says, the date and hours of employment, January the 18th, 5 to 8. So it's probably mixing at that stage, I think. Or
No, they probably recorded around that. I think they started mixing in the big late January, early February. They're still recording that. It's only about 5 days after the A&R sessions, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
So the funniest thing on this is each one of these union sheets has a leader's name attached to each song. Who's the leader on "Sweet Pain"? Paul Frelly. So I just find that ironic as hell, and it's cool shit like that you find in the document stashes.
Interesting.
And that's all I've got to say about Sweet Pain. I did not like the Wagner solo. Pardon me, the Ace solo, because I think, like Ken said, the one that's on the album is just so burned into the mind.
It's a tough one. Even if it was better, it was too tough. Yeah, it's you know it, you already love it.
Yeah, but I will say what I did think after I finally heard Ace's solo, I was like, that's it? It was nothing. It wasn't like thunderbolts of lightning, anything spectacular. It sounded like Ace doing a typical, well, all right, Curly, here's my solo, diddle, 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 done. All
right. Yeah.
Nothing special about it whatsoever. It's got the Ace-isms in it, but Dick's, really fits in there. That sounds really bad. Can't take that sentence back either. So
we'll save that for later.
Yeah, Wagner's solo really fits.
We can clip that off.
Yeah. Nope, I don't do editing. So so that's a really cool one. So I've actually found out all the sheets to all the songs on there. So it's got the dates. I love shit like that. So that takes me into my question for you, James. And you've done a lot of press for Shout It Out Loud in the life cycle of the book so far. I got to say, has anyone reached out to you that you weren't able to contact about the book when you were writing it with information or details that you would have loved to have maybe included in the book? Because you've got a lot of good press, I must say. I'm very impressed by that.
Thanks. Yeah. Not really. I mean, there's a few people who come out of the woodwork, had some great pictures that posted on the Facebook page we have for it. I did that interview with Rick Stewart, who was the head of the security, and he was in the building, so he told some great Bob Ezrin stories. He wasn't there for all of it, so that would have been nice. This week for his new solo album, and it's funny because his manager was like, "Hey, can we see the book?" And I'm like, "Where was this guy 3 years ago when I was trying to get a hold of him?" But no, there hasn't been anybody. I was really happy with. I mean, I think I gave enough, if not too much, attention to every piece of minutia. So I don't really feel that I missed out on anybody. I mean, I don't know if you guys felt that there was like another voice that I could have gotten. I mean, certainly I've said this a million times to every interviewer, and that is I made an attempt to get all 4 members of KISS. If I couldn't get all 4 members, I didn't want to get any because of the rift. I didn't want Peter to be on quoted from 2012 and nothing from Paul and Gene, because then Paul and Gene would just say, well, this is a Peter apologist book. Or Ace ripping on the fact that so I wanted everybody or nobody. So at one point I just decided to get off the pot and just use the quotes from the period. So I really feel like I did my due diligence and turned every stone I could upside down.
No, that's really cool. And I got to go back and catch up on that Rick Stewart podcast, because listening to him on some of the things, I mean, number one, he's got the greatest voice ever for, a podcast. So I want to catch up on that one. One other thing, and I'm sure you'll find this interesting, is in that batch of documents, the orchestra. So
wow, where did you get? I mean, I didn't get this to get Julian. You're a master.
Now I'm actually holding this up for a reason. If anyone else has this document out here, I've only got the first page of the orchestra, and what it says is that it was a 28-member orchestra, and it's got. I think you mentioned one of these guys in there, Julius Baker, in the book, and you didn't know the contractor, Gene Orloff.
Yes. Bob didn't remember either. Neither one of those guys. And Corky said there was 40 strong, so maybe they cut it back because of price, because I know that they might have contacted them. But it's interesting. Everybody has different, like I said, Jay Messina argued to the end of the day until I finally had to go to his apartment and show him that the end of the Rock and Roll Demons is not listed on the album. He swore up and down, and then you sent me that acetate. So Jay said the last time it left the record plant, it said Rock and Roll Demons on there. So there's a lot of people whose memories, I mean, certainly you're only going to get people's memories. You're not going to get to the nut of it. But thank you. That's great. I love this stuff.
So anyone out there has the other page, because obviously I'm working on the book for The Elder, and we've got the 76-piece orchestra for that. So
I was going to say there wasn't 40 because 2 of the guys went off to play cards with Ace.
Boom, boom.
Very nice.
And a couple of others went
Nice.
out for cigars, right? They ran out of smokes.
Exactly.
That's the part I love in the book. You recounting. I think it's in the chapter called "Black Ties and Tails." The guy, obviously union musicians, and they were some serious players in the orchestra who did this work. Just coming in and smoking cigars, ready to just lay down their tracks, and it's a very short period of time that they're in there. So that kind of Lonnie. Let's move on to you. And Great Expectations.
Great Expectations. That, I think, I like the demo of, and I think a lot of people are going to agree that they like the demo of Great Expectations better than what wound up on the album, at least lyric wise. Where Gene's going through it and mentioning the members of the band's names. I always thought that was when I first heard that demo. I guess I was in high school when I first heard that demo, and I thought, wow, that is so much cooler than what ended up on the album. But it's that song, maybe, and I know Ezrin has his mark all over the album, but would Kiss have ever even considered the notion of having a boys' choir sing with them prior to Bob Ezrin coming into the fold? Absolutely not. I mean, that song reminds me so much of Billion Dollar Babies and what Bob was really doing at the time. I mean, not necessarily like there's a boys' choir in Billion Dollar Babies, but just the production wise of that song reminds me just like the big sound of Billion Dollar Babies. And it's so odd from anything Kiss has ever done, but at the same time it fits in to that structure perfectly. And then to hear it live for the first time over 30 years later, almost 30 years later, 20 whatever years later, it was really cool to hear him do that at the symphony. Just because of the production on it, and you thought you'd never hear that song live, and you understood why it was never played live, and the symphony obviously presented the perfect opportunity for it. So Great Expectations is different, but it's Bob Ezrin's song to me. I mean, more than anything, but I still like that demo. Do you guys like that demo better than
I love the demo. I just wish it had the sonic qualities of
exactly.
the finished product.
I guess the lyrics on the demo, I guess I like better than the lyrics. I guess you could say that's better, is more accurate.
Yeah, and I think it one-ups the Beatles. I mean, because the Beatles were, famous for bringing in symphonies, for sweetening, shall we say. Ezrin coming in and, let's throw a choir on there. I mean, it just takes it up to the next level. And I didn't get the Alice Cooper stuff because obviously I was never really into Alice Cooper before Kiss, and after Kiss I was more into, Brutal Planet and Raise Your Fist and Yell in that era of the Coop. So I was actually thankful in your book that you spend a lot of time on Alice. That really kind of lays the groundwork for a lot of the things Bob does with Kiss. He had field tested with Alice, who was a similar sort of performer, a similar, I guess, kind of writer. Do you get that, James, that, you get the symphony, you get the, kind of the Billion Dollar Babies treatment?
Yep. And I think what Lonnie said, I couldn't agree with more. In fact, I mentioned in the book that the great triumvirate for Bob's sonic, achievement here during this period is Billion Dollar Babies, Destroyer, The Wall. This big arena, huge. I mean, Bob admits it. I pushed him enough, and he finally at the end said, "Look, I know exactly what I was trying to do. I tried to, for years, we took Alice Cooper in the studio, we built the show in the album. We created the killer character, the school's out delinquent character. We kept building these characters, and then they would take it on the road and they do a show of it. Finally, we wanted to take the show, because they become so big, and give the fans that feeling." And he says towards the end of the book, when I was wrapping up my interviews, he said, "I always wanted to get a sonic thing so people can close their eyes and feel like they're at the show. It's so hard without the crowd there and the sweat and the noise of it." And even Corky Stasiak, the assistant engineer, said, I think Destroyer is the closest they came to that big arena sound. And then, of course, The Wall, I think, is his great masterpiece working with Pink Floyd. So absolutely that triumvirate and that build-up. And I was a huge Alice Cooper fan. So Destroyer really spoke to me in that way. Absolutely sonically and image-wise, that's a great combination. But Lonnie hit it on the head. I mean, Billion Dollar Babies and Destroyer are much more brothers in arms than Dressed to Kill and Destroyer, or Animals and The Wall. You see, there's no lead up. It's always Bob thrown into the deep end of the pool and changing it around. For me, that's the great triumvirate. It's Billion Dollar Babies, Destroyer, and The Wall. 3 great sonically albums that you could listen to back to back, and it's fantastic.
Ken, Great Expectations.
Oh, Great Expectations. First, I'm going to say I agree about the Billion Dollar Babies and and Destroyer. I mean, those are the closest sounding albums, in my opinion. The guitars and so on is very, very similar, very similar. As for Great Expectations, I agree. I like the lyrics from the demo better. After hearing that, I was like, oh yeah, this to me makes more sense to me. It works better for me in my mind. But the song, I guess technically you'd call that Great Expectations a second ballad, really. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, to me, it's a ballad. To my ear, it's a ballad. I mean, Beth is real ballad, but Great Expectations still to me is a ballad. And so that's throwing 2 ballads on the Kiss album back then was pretty risky there. But the song, I enjoy the song. It's not my favorite on the album. I like Sweet Pain better than Great Expectations. Just me. Sound wise, it's just great production. Great production.
Can I throw in, before we leave Great Expectations, we're talking about Destroyer and 40 years ago. The album was the way you presented your product. And Bob very much says, and in the book, and he talks about this in other situations, he used the first song, the introduction, Detroit Rock City, gets you into the mood. The last song on the first side is that great choir that fades us out into Flaming Youth. It's different when you hear it, and even on cassette, Lonnie, you still end it, and then it starts the next side. Now it's CDs or Spotify or anything. You don't get that. So we have to point that out. The album does live on, but it's of its time, and it was perfectly set up, and I think Great Expectations is a wonderful way to end that first side for that album.
Great song. God of Thunder. Lonnie, throw that at you.
God of Thunder. It's obviously it's Gene Simmons' signature song, and we all know that obviously Paul Stanley wrote it. And you listen to that version of God of Thunder on the box set, and then listen to God of Thunder as you know it, and it's like 2 different songs really. And to hear we're just stroking Bob's ego the whole time. I hope he listens to the show because it's all we're talking about. But to listen to what Bob did to that song, from what Paul brought into the studio to what it became on the album, and not only what it became on the album, but what it became on stage as well, and how that song just took the demon character from just the tongue-wagging demon on stage to, it was obviously the perfect choice for Gene to drew blood in front of, just to make it Gene's moment on stage. It was the perfect song for that, and I don't think any other song that they do, and I know they've toyed around in recent years with different songs doing the blood with. No other song works the way God of Thunder does with that. It's signature Kiss, and it's become, even for the casual Kiss fan who may have a couple Kiss albums but not all of them, and may go to the show when they come, maybe go to the show when Kiss comes around, maybe not every time Kiss comes around, but majority of the time. I think the average Kiss fan would walk, like on the Rock the Nation tour, walked away probably disappointed that, well, Why did he drew blood before Unholy, that song that I barely know off of Revenge, or don't even know off of Revenge? You know, Gene drews blood in front of God of Thunder. That's just the way we do things around here. You know what I mean? But I could see the average Kiss fan thinking that, and it's become Gene's signature track. But the way that album is on, back to the studio version of it though, with Ezrin's kids screaming in the background, it always reminded me of like Godzilla almost, with like the kids like almost like sheer screams in the background because they're petrified of the God of Thunder. That's what it always reminded me of as a kid. I guess going back to, we talked about comic books and fantasy type movies and things like that. I guess it all kind of ties in at the end of the day for some of us. But I mean, I don't want to talk too much. I'm probably going to steal what some people are going to say about God of Thunder. So it's obviously it's Gene's signature track, and I think a Kiss show is lost without it.
Yeah, I think for me, God of Thunder, I mean, doesn't every like comic book character who's made it to the screen or to public need its own theme song? You know, Batman or Superman, it kind of has theme music that goes along with them, and Gene gets the perfect one. But I think for that, the coolest thing about that song is when you listen to Paul's version of it, that he had the balls to let it go, to let that piece of music go in a direction that he hadn't intended. It is just, kind of a really proud moment, because as we've learned more about Paul from his book and some of the things he said in interviews over the years, that must have been a tremendous thing for him to give it away. When, he's giving away a vocal performance on the song, and I think he gets more out of it perhaps by giving it away and being able to say, well, Gene's theme song, I wrote. So
he brings it up every chance he gets.
He sure does. Yeah, he told us one of the few quotes I have in my book is an interview I did in 2006. He couldn't wait to tell me that, so I put it in the book.
So that's what I love about the song the most. It's not one of the songs I actually care to hear. I actually left a concert in the middle of it. I got paged for work one time, walked out in the middle of God of Thunder, to my shame, but, didn't have a choice with the pager going off. Not one of my favorites, but it's Gene's song, and all I see is him drooling blood and green lights and all that when I hear it. Ken, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the genius of Bob Ezrin, to actually hear that song and say, this Gene should be singing this song. I mean, that's just amazing how he even, would come up with that. But I guess the God of Thunder, the look of the demon, just from that standpoint made sense, and then they modified lyrics after that. But that song, I always loved it live. Again, I heard it first on a live too, so and it's sped up a bit, and I liked a little bit of the faster pace. But I had some people I knew that on the studio version, they were scared when they heard that song. They really were. They thought, man, this is so evil, hell, devils, and that sort of thing. It just kind of creeped them out. But I never got creeped out by it myself. But that song, it just epitomizes Gene, and it's going to go on forever. And like Lonnie said, that he's got to do the blood thing before that song. And then the part when they do it in concert, they have that part where he goes, "I am the Lord of the Wasteland," and I don't know if they modulate his voice or do what. In live, it's just awesome song.
James, have we gone to you on this one? I can't remember.
I just have one thing I'd like to say about that you guys didn't touch upon, and I a couple of things. The first thing is, I think, and he just mentioned it, Ken, I think the second time he sings "I Am the Lord of the Wasteland" may be the coolest vocal on any Kiss album. It's amazing. Every time that I hear that, it chills. And believe me, I listened to that a billion times working on the book, way more than I want. My wife had to hear it way more than she'd ever want to hear. But
Sounds
that
like my
song,
life.
Exactly. Enough with the Kiss. Wrap this up. That's number one. Number two, I think it's really great, as Julian mentioned. Paul gave the song up, but he wanted it to be his theme song. When Bob said make theme songs, this was supposed to be his "I'm the God of Love," the God of Rock and Roll, which is a euphemism for sex, and then Aphrodite. But when he put the lyric in there, then Bob admits it. About "We'll make love till we bleed." Bob started thinking there's a little bit of deviance in here that I used to hear in the Alice Cooper songs. The monster who's Cold Ethel and that I Love the Dead. I think, and he said, well, Paul's not going to sing that. That's a Gene thing. So I thought that was really cool. He connected image over music, and slowing it down really made it a great thing. And of course, God of Thunder is an actual thing. It's Thor, which is a comic book character and also a god of Greeks, Greek god, I should say. And so Bob, we would chuckle about it because he would say, no one really noticed that I put a Beethoven sonata at the beginning of Great Expectations, or that God of Thunder was already Thor, but yet it's Gene. So they completely stole it and made Gene the God of Thunder, which I think is just fantastic. And it goes to show you the power of this album from an image standpoint.
Yeah, that's really cool. Good connections to make. All right, let's start at the beginning then. Detroit Rock City, which for me is one of those two songs I've got to hear when I go to a Kiss concert, the other one being Deuce. I have got to hear Detroit Rock City. Love it to pieces. Again, same as what we've just said about God of Thunder with Paul's original demo. It really needed some help to become magical, which I think Bob certainly did. For me, and this is going to be a question that I ask you at the end, but I'll say it right now for myself, and it is my favorite song on the album, Detroit Rock City. And that excludes the introduction part, which, if I could edit that out, into its own separate track so it fades out before starting in, I would be thrilled. And obviously the record label has had difficulties trying to edit that out as well, because you don't edit Ezrin out of his songs. So, Detroit Rock City. James, straight back at you for this.
Best song, but my favorite Kiss song, period. And I'll quickly say, and that middle aria part, which Ken mentioned earlier, is one of the greatest things ever in a Kiss song. I love everything about it. It's got that Americana concept of the car and Detroit and where it came from, and I love the fact that it's a rousing song. But getting back to the point of my childhood and hearing that song and loving it immediately and just loving everything about it, listening to it before I went out with my friends on a Friday night or Saturday night. But years later, when things were rough for me and I was, having a hard time, getting going, and writing is a tough gig and all the other stuff that goes with it, or breakups I would have, or just the kind of stuff you go through in life, financial problems, I could always put that song on, and it completely took me back. Completely. And this is not like one of those things where you hear a song from the 70s and go, oh, wow, I haven't heard this in 25 years. I had been continuously listening to that song, unlike other Kiss songs, which I had kind of abandoned for a while. That song never left me. It always made me feel great at any time. And for me, it may have been the impetus of me writing this book in the first place. Detroit Rock City is my favorite Kiss song. Maybe one of my favorite songs of any band ever.
That's a great sentiment, actually, that you just said. And I think for me, it remains fresh. Every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, not this song.
Turn it up.
Yes.
It's not one, Detroit Rock City.
It,
there's never a situation for me that's skip. Not possible.
Is there a better driving song? Maybe L.A. Woman. Think of a better, I'm serious. Is there a better driving song than Detroit? I mean, it's scary because the guy crashes at the end. It's like listening to or watching an airplane disaster movie while you're on a plane. But I love driving and listening to that song. Love it.
I think this song is the only one on Resurrected that really bothers me. And that's the attempt to fix the little... lyrical
95.
Yeah,
95.
The lyrical issue that I just wish he hadn't bothered with, because it did not work. And for everything else that he did good on Resurrected on the song, that just kind of detracts from me on that. So I still listen to the original version simply because of that. Lonnie,
Detroit Rock City.
You hate it, right?
What? No.
Okay.
Detroit Rock City is probably the first Kiss song I ever heard. And it's probably, I'll echo what James says, probably my favorite Kiss song. It's perfect in so many ways. And I love when Kiss opens a show to that song. I love when Kiss ends a show with that song. It's perfect in both positions. And the guitar solo is, it's maybe probably the most famous Kiss guitar solo, and it's it. I don't know. I don't. It's so great. It's hard to describe almost to me because Detroit Rock City is the epitome of what Kiss is. And if someone like I remember if I was a kid or something and somebody wanted to hear a Kiss song like, oh, you're in the Kiss. I don't know much about Kiss like in the late '80s, early '90s. That'd be the song I'd put on for them. Is Detroit Rock City? Well, you gotta have to hear this song then because if you want to know what Kiss is about, you got to hear this. This is great. Well, here you got to wait to this a minute 30 of this crap before the song starts. But this is what Kiss is all about to me, and I don't know. I can't say enough good things about it because it's so perfect from the way it begins and the way you can feel yourself in the car almost with the guy to the car crash, and especially on the Destroyer version of it when you can hear the motor running in the middle of the song, even that is really lost on like the double platinum version and other greatest hits versions that they put out. I'm with Julian. I wish I could take that Destroyer version of it and edit out the first part of it so I can have that, because that's my favorite version of the song is actually the Destroyer version of it where you can hear that motor running in the background and then the crash at the end. But it's the best Kiss song there is, period.
Yeah, it's somewhat sad that the last song, I guess the originals ever recorded together as a band, was the Detroit Rock City '99 version, which really, sadly, just mirrors age and all the years that had gone in between the original version and 1999. So, great song. King of the Nighttime World, I guess we got to do next.
Oh, wait, Ken hasn't done
Ken didn't go.
Ken, did I forget?
Detroit Rock City.
Damn, I'm sorry.
I'll keep it simple. I mean, we this is a Kiss classic. I mean, it has to be in every live performance. It really does. Goes without saying. Just the beat, the beat of the song, the way it drives, and picks up speed, kind of like a car. And then the bass line in it, I just always loved that bass line. Boy, you never heard anything like that before. So yeah, it's a 4-star out of 4, and that's all I can say. It's classic. Love it.
If I may just defend the opening part for a second, because it's taking a beating here, and I want to say that Lonnie and both Ken mentioned it. It gets you in the car. The bit where he sticks in Alive and he connects Alive to Destroyer, and then which connects it to the ending part with the Rock and Roll Demons, and he gets in the car and he's like singing along, and I think it really gets you in the car, and then it comes out of it. I think maybe it's a little long. I love it anyway. I play it. I love the whole thing, but I think it does get you in that mindset that Lonnie was nailing right there. And then Ken said it's like a car. It sort of takes up from there. So I just wanted to defend the opening part. I think it works sonically, or at least for me, dramatically, or as Bob likes to say, thematically.
Yeah, I think also to add on to that a little bit is that's the one song that the introduction section that you've really got to listen to with headphones on to get the full benefit of it. And Corky, probably in your book and in interviews I've done with him, really goes into a lot of detail about the binaural microphone technique, which is probably why it puts you in the car, because it's like a 3-dimensional audio experience of physically getting in a car, I guess. So, that's really cool, and that's a great detail to read in your book as well. Corky's stuff is some of the standout material about the technical side of the recording. So, Ken, I'm going to go straight back to you with the with King of the Nighttime World, since it follows Detroit Rock City and they can't be separated.
Yeah, it can't be, even on a live too. They're not separated, right? So I was used to that, and when we got when I got the album. It's just a great song. I like the way it, the car crash happens and then it comes whining in this other song. And it's just you could see that song in concert, and why they don't play it a lot through the years. I don't understand why they don't really play it live. We don't see it very often. I mean, it's only come up a couple of times recently, at least. So that song is just a great song. I know it's not fully written by, I think it was Kim Fowley. Is that the one?
No, that's the one from the Hollywood Stars. So,
well, the Hollywood Star. Yeah, that's right. That one. I'm getting mixed up with the Do You Love Me?
But Fowley did co-write it. He did co-write it. Yeah.
Did he co-write it with him at
He
the
wrote
time?
the lyrics. Yeah, he did. He
Oh, so
yeah.
Aha. So I was partly right.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, it's a great song. You're right. It was done by that other band earlier, but
Hollywood
Kiss,
Stars is right. Yep.
Kiss made that song their own. I mean, and it felt right. Fell right into place on the album. So I have no problem with that song. It's a great song.
And again, I think for me, like all the other stuff that we talked about from Magna Graphics, it shows what can be done to a decent demo, or an unrealized idea, and taking something and making it special. Which, when you listen to the Hollywood Stars version, and it's kind of a little bit more slow tempo, and they've really got the tempo perfect on the Kiss version and really polished it up. Obviously, I don't think the Hollywood Stars version is a fully realized studio recording. So you're not going to get the same sonic qualities, but there's a vast difference in the magic in the song there. So you can't separate the two. I would love to hear that more in concert too.
They've done that a few times where Kiss has made the song better than the original song. God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and Rock and Roll Hell. So those are examples, and so they're able to improve what was out there and make it their own. Really make it their own.
But I think the great thing about King of the Nighttime World is that it and Detroit Rock City are probably one of the very best 1-2 punches in a Kiss a Kiss album throughout their whole history. I can't really think of anything else that is just so perfectly, setting up the whole rest of the album. Could have been, someone just tapping a wood block, after that 1-2 punch. It's just absolutely incredible. James, what's your take on King of the Nighttime World?
Yeah, I want to give Mark Anthony props here. He was the co-writer along with Kim Fowley, and I know that Bob and Paul get co-writes because they brightened it up for sure. It changed the key a little bit. And I like the Hollywood Stars version. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the New York Dolls-y kind of thing. You can also listen to that on YouTube. But again, another great, and it's funny, you asked me before about people I wish I talked to. Well, when the book was done and I was looking for a picture of the Hollywood Stars to get source material, their bass player, and his name escapes me, was the guy who gave me the rights to it. And he said, "Oh, I'd love to go on record because we're really bitter about that." And I said, "The book's done." I never thought to reach out to those guys because again, I don't know how many Kiss fans really want to hear the Hollywood Stars, moan about this, but it's part of the history of it. And I just think they felt like their career kind of went down the can, and Mark Anthony ended up getting royalties with Kim Fowley, but not them. But I think it's a perfect 1-2 punch, like you mentioned. Aside from Deuce into Strutter at the beginning of Alive, it's as good as it gets. Yeah,
Lonnie.
Yeah. Talking about a 1-2 punch and two songs that should be together. I mean, I really loved how you hear back in the day when they did these Short Rock City and then straight into King of the Nighttime World when they played it live. They sound so perfect together on Destroyer. They're just melded into one another that, you hear King of the Nighttime World start and even if you don't hear Detroit Rock City before you listen to King of the Nighttime World, you kind of think, oh yeah, it comes in right after the car crash in Detroit Rock City. How you listen to the radio sometimes and you hear Led Zeppelin's Heartbreaker followed immediately by Living Loving Maid, or you hear Queen, We Will Rock You followed immediately by We Are the Champions. Right. To me, that's the way radio stations should play Detroit Rock City, is always followed by King of the Nighttime World, because they meld into each other so perfectly the way those other two songs do. Maybe even better than those other two songs do. That, to me, that Kiss should have always gotten the treatment on those two songs on the radio, like Led Zeppelin and Queen had on those two other tracks that you always hear back to back when you listen to the radio.
Right, and
you can't hear Heartbreaker and not hear Living Loving Maid. You can't do it.
Right. Well, it's also for the beginning of an album, and people have been asking me, "Is this Kiss's Sgt. Pepper's?" You cannot listen to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and not listen to With a Little Help from My Friends. It goes right at Billy. And so the car crash is fantastic because on Platinum, Double Platinum, it just da-na-na-na. And I don't know if that wonderful guitar thing would have worked without that crash. So again, a nice production value there. So, but I think that all those things Lonnie was saying is so true. Those two songs are inseparable. I don't think you can play the two of them without, or play one without the other. Absolutely.
And for those of you who only listen on Spotify or playlists, I have had to go back and fix my randomized playlists so that those two songs are together. It's just you cannot experience anything randomly with those two songs. Everything else in the catalog, fine.
If we do nothing else from this podcast, people can never listen to Detroit Rock City without listening to King of the Nighttime. From here on out,
calling it.
Exactly.
All right, let's go into the first single, and Shout It Out Loud was actually performed during the tail end of the Alive tour. I think it came out in March as a single. This is one of those songs that I kind of love to hate. I like it, but I kind of, just feel it was the wrong lead-off single for an album. I get where they're going. I love what they do with the song. The trade-off in vocals. I like how it means so much to them that it's the song that they put out for the reunion era. It's a special song. And I guess it goes back to Wicked Lester as well, so it's kind of the full circle song. But, again, it just doesn't have the same quality to me as Detroit Rock City or King of the Nighttime World or the next single, Flaming Youth. So it's kind of one of those songs that I'm on the fence about. So... James, what's your take on Shout It Out Loud?
Love it. Another one that takes me right back to being 13 years old and swimming in the pool and bringing my Kiss album to the party and be like, what? Everybody's complaining. What's this? Shut up. We're playing this. And that coming on and everyone going, hey, this is a great party tune. I also like it because I'm a big fan of the Stax, the old Atlantic soul records, that call and response thing that Bob and Paul were going for. And it's has two really great redeeming qualities for a Kiss song. Number one, it's the last time they all got together in Destroyer and played together. All that backbiting of Ace disappearing and them, heckling Peter for the thing. They got together one last time, wrote the song as the album was being recorded, came in and just bashed it out. Love that, and it sounds that way. And secondly, I love it that it's a combination. And it's really only been done, I think, on Rock. You guys help me out because you know better than me. But Rock and Roll All Night, and maybe a little, maybe I off of Music from the Elder, where Gene sings his verses and Paul sings it. I love that. They're kind of like John Lennon and Paul McCartney there, which they rarely ever do. Gene did his songs, demo with it, bring it, blah blah blah. And that's why I love Shout It Out Loud. I loved learning the story of making it because it made me love the song more.
Yeah, that's a great perspective on it, Lonnie.
I love Shout It Out Loud. It's, to me, like I was talking about God of Thunder earlier, it's one of those songs to me that you have to hear when you go to a Kiss show. And I know a lot of people maybe are tired of it, may put it in the same category of like a Love Gun or Lick It Up or I Love It Loud thing, and I really don't need to hear these certain songs when I go see the band live. But to me, it's as essential as Detroit Rock City or Deuce or Rock and Roll All Night to me. I mean, you have to hear Shout It Out Loud. I mean, that's just one of Kiss's anthems, and it's just one of Kiss's signature tracks that you have to hear. And it's a short song, so if you don't like it, it's over in a little over 3 minutes. But you have to hear it, and the work of I have to echo what James is saying, that to hear the trade-off in the vocals of Gene and Paul together is fantastic to me, and I love songs like that where they trade off vocals and you hear both of them in there. Whether it be this song, whether it be whether it be some of the later stuff like Stand or Take Me Down Below, even off of Monster. I love it when you hear those two of the most recognizable voices in rock, in my opinion, too. That you hear them both in the same song, and because we've all seen different versions of Kiss come and go since Destroyer and that, but the two voices that remain are Gene and Paul, and to hear those two voices together is perfect to me. That you have to have Shout It Out Loud, and it's the follow up too of Rock and Roll All Night. It's just the anthem. They recognize what I get, and I guess you said it was like one of the last songs they recorded for Destroyer. I guess they could see what was happening with Rock and Roll All Night as well. So it was a follow up anthem, and maybe just going off the tails of that. So I love Shout It Out Loud.
Okay. Ken.
Yeah, that's probably my second favorite song off of Destroyer. Yeah, I love the trading off of the vocals. It's just a great party song. And, you know, it's just great. And like Lonnie said, it's got to be in concert. I mean, it's one of those ones. I never get sick of it. When they start playing it at the beginning, the guitars come in. Just, I just love it. It's just a great song.
Yeah.
I never get tired of that song.
It's too damn happy. It's like a Jack
Yeah.
Russell.
Yeah, it's happy.
Little yap dog that's always happy. Just
It's like
slap it and it's
embedded
happy.
in me in the fact that I remember like the first time I saw him in '96, and they played that early in the set, and they didn't say it. It was before they did so much talking in between songs like they do now. Like they finish a song and you just go into those guitars, that guitar intro. And my brother and I look at each other and just high five each other. They're playing Shout It Out Loud. It's so freaking cool. So I mean, you gotta have it.
Yeah, and it's a very melodic song. When I was playing the album to death, my daughter, who grew up during my writing of this book, I could hear her singing it in the other room. She would just be out of nowhere, just start going, shout it, shout it, and I thought it's hitting her right where I mean that's when you're a kid and the songs hit you a certain way. It's very melodic. Maybe that's why Julian hates it, but I love it for that. I love it because I'm a pop guy as much as a rock guy. I love a good song that has a great infectious melody, and that song does. It's a great pop song.
Yeah. Well, we've touched on Great Expectations already and Sweet Pain, so I'm going to skip over those. And Flaming Youth. I don't think we've said much about that at all, apart maybe the Mad Dog connection. Flaming Youth is one of my favorite songs on the album. And it's one that I got most excited that they'd finally dusted off on the cruise last year and given it its full treatment. So I was thrilled to see some of those extremely high-quality YouTube videos of just seeing the band perform it again was a great thing. I don't think, again, that, like Shout Out Loud, that it was necessarily the greatest single choice for the album, but for what they're trying to say, the audience that they're trying to address, it perfectly encapsulates what the band is about. So, Ken, what are your thoughts on Flaming Youth?
Flaming Youth, and again, I just heard it a little while ago. It's a great song, and it's amazing that they put those parts in the middle there of Gene's song to build on top of what was already there. It's a good song. It's not my favorite song. I originally, when I first heard it, I thought that was pretty good. It's good, it's good for the kids kind of song. To me, I mean, when you're a teenager,
I was the kid.
Yeah, and
Perfect for me. Yeah,
and I enjoyed it. It kind of reminded me of that other we were talking about Alice Cooper, Department of Youth.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So it reminds me of that in a way, that style and that theme. But I like it. I mean, it's a good song. I'd love to hear it live. I would really love to hear it live.
With the Calliope?
Yes. I want to hear some live Calliope. Exactly.
Why not?
They should do like they do for Pet Sounds and play, some come out and play the whole damn album. They should do a Destroyer this year tour. I'd go to that.
Oh yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I mean, this is the one album that they could
set our pleads for that.
Yeah, we've made our wishes. Lonnie.
Flaming Youth, it's just a rallying crowd song, just really like in the same tone of Shout It Out Loud almost. That it's Kiss really getting in touch with their audience. They knew who their audience was at the time. That it was young guys coming to see them. That it was a younger crowd, mostly made up of men. When you go to a Kiss show, it's still mostly guys that go to a Kiss show. And unless somebody's dragging their wife or their girlfriend with them. But it's mostly, it's a guy band, and, Flaming Youth will set the world on fire. It's just kind of a song that a young kid who could, and they're relating to, the kid growing up in Middle America. And that's where they were big at. The kid growing up in Middle America who's, fighting with his mom and dad and, but, he has big plans for his life, and kind of echoing almost what James does in his book, just going through. I love how you do it in your book, though, how you break down each one of those songs in a chapter, though. By the way, it's
thank you.
absolutely fantastic. You can getting off on a tangent here real quick, but how like if you're like your Detroit Rock City or your King of the Nighttime World, just going through it, like you can the way you describe each song, like you don't even have to have heard the song in the past, and you can relate to what's happening, even if you never heard those songs. It's absolutely fan. Those are my favorite parts of the whole book is how you break down those songs. Actually,
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Lonnie, because most people said they didn't really. I joked with Julian when he first interviewed me. He was like, I hadn't read them. I skipped over them, but I hope he did read
It's
them.
my favorite part of the book. It's my favorite part of the book.
It's my favorite part to write.
You can hear those songs without ever hearing them, in my opinion.
Right. Thank you. Well, it was my favorite thing to write because it was real creative writing for me. Go ahead, please, Lonnie.
Absolutely. So, yeah, Flaming Youth was just another rallying cry, and they were really relating to who their audience was. And I'm with you. I'd love to hear it live. I've loved the cruise stuff that they've done. They did it in Oklahoma a couple weeks ago, and it's not too late to still do a Kiss 40th anniversary Destroyer tour. So I'd love to hear it, even if you did it in just 10 cities or something. Just
yes,
do it. And I know I'd travel to go see it. There's no doubt about it.
James, do you get a good feel for? I mean, we know Kim Fowley's involved in the writing of this song. About who did what on it? Do we have any idea? Of where each player comes in.
Yeah, well, Kim did not work on this song. He worked on "Do You Love Me" as well. Some of the lyrics on that, and then he worked on "King of the Night."
Damn, I'm thinking of the next song we're going to talk about.
That's quite all right. But there were three, and I think I put it out. There were three different songs. There was the we talked about before. Dun 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 ba da da is Mad Dog, and then the beginning. There was some riff in there that's Aces, and Paul came up with the Flaming Youth, the title, and it was great because Bob was like, Flaming Youth, great title, let's write a song about that. So they cobbled this together. This is the 7/4 time that bore the boot camp, which I read about and dedicate a whole chapter to. But I will say this to again, piggyback on Lonnie, and thank you very much for that because it was the most fun to write those things. It was, and I didn't really fight for it. My editors were like, "You really need this," and Jeff Suzz had wrote me and he said, Kiss fans already know the songs, and I said, but a lot of people don't. I'm writing a history book here, and I want to give each song. I had already done it, and I wanted to include it in the book, so I appreciate a real Kiss fan.
Fantastic, I love it.
Thank you. But I will say this. My parents think I'm crazy, and they hate the things I do. Is as good as it gets for a 13-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. Period. It just, that's what I wanted to do. Exactly. It spoke to me. Exactly what you guys were saying. They knew their audience. It was me. And I'll only disagree, although history will agree with Julian, I will disagree in the sense where Kiss was trying to piggyback Rock and Roll All Night, which shouted out loud and Flaming Youth. They were trying to get another youthful anthem, and they failed. They totally failed. I mean, Shout Out Loud actually did pretty well. I think it got into the 30s. I could be wrong or whatever. But, I mean, it didn't do what Rock and Roll All Night did, and it certainly didn't do what Beth did. But they knew exactly who they were talking to. And Shout Out Loud and Flaming Youth, to me, are brothers in the sense where they spoke to me totally. And those first two lines, and Paul singing it in such a happy way. Yeah, my parents have no idea what I'm about, but it doesn't matter. And
I'm going to prove them wrong.
I love that. Just love it.
And you're right, it went to USA 31, and the Canadians loved it, #1. So Canadians obviously got it.
Yeah.
So let's go straight into the one I just had the brain fart on, and that's "Do You Love Me?" and the Kim Fowley. So that question straight back at you, Fowley, Ezra, and Stanley, because I love that song, and that to me kind of like sums up Paul Stanley and his character. So where he gave away God of Thunder for Gene to be his theme song, he then wrote himself his own theme song, and if you read his autobiography, suddenly a lot of it makes a hell of a lot more sense when you really get a better picture of Paul Stanley. Do You Love Me? So, James, straight back at you on that song.
Yeah, well, Bob had that chorus, kept singing it over and over again on the piano. Do you love me? Do you love? And he wanted to get it fleshed out, so Paul worked on most of it with him, and then Kim Fowley came in at the end. And one of my favorite stories, and I should mention before Wagner both passed since I interviewed them for the book, and so it's the last time neither one of those guys will be on record about this record or the kind of contributions they made. But one of my favorite stories in the book, or that Kim told me, was when he was going up to pick up the bass player for the Runaways when he was managing them, and he was in the back seat with Joan Jett, and he starts writing these lyrics on a napkin and a pad, and Joan Jett's mother's like, well, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm working on my pension," because he knew he was going to make a lot of money just having his name on a Kiss record. And I will say this, to piggyback, show you how everything kind of intertwines. When Hurricane Sandy hit this area a couple of years ago, Corky lives right on the and Julian and I touched upon this last time, and he lost a lot of his records, and including the notations in the journals that he kept for Destroyer. So again, my book is the last time that's laid out there. It's sad, but you know who saved all of his stuff? Joan Jett. Joan Jett, he told me, is like a neighbor and saved the rest of his stuff. Otherwise, it would have been all lost. So I love how that all kind of connects together in the album.
Yeah, and Corky is absolutely awesome. I mean, getting to talk to him, isn't he like passionate beyond, description, really? I can't really do justice how passionate he is about the work that he's done. And, it comes through in your book, in the interview segments that you've done with him, just, what a pro. What a contributor as well. So when we're talking about Bob Ezrin, I mean, Corky deserves, a hell of a lot of aplomb for this album as well.
And Corky watched our your podcast. I had sent him a link, and I'll send Bob this link so we can see how we're all like stroking his ego. But
then I've only got one thing to say. Bob, I'm really sorry.
Oh, I don't have to send it to him. But I was going to say, Corky said he got teared up when he watched, because he knows that a guy like him is working on all these albums, and until he has someone write about it and talk about Born to Run and Walls and Bridges and Give Enough Rope and Welcome to My Nightmare and Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over, nobody knows. And for him, and he said he was so moved, not only reading the book but also the podcast. So he knows. I mean, it's a big deal for him to get out there, and I'm so glad that everybody enjoys hearing his stories. It should be out there.
Excellent. Ken, what about you? Do you love me?
I love you, Julian.
I like the stove. I don't know.
Oh, that wasn't the question. Do you love me? Yes, great song. I especially love the middle part, the change up where your black sun your glasses make you look just like Queen, and just love it. Well put
Great
together.
bass. Yeah.
I love hearing it live. It always sounds great, and even though they say "Do you love me" a whole lot of times in the song, it's still a great song. Great song. I have nothing bad to say about it, and if it's a good ending to the album. I guess not technically the real ending, but it's for song wise. That's a good ending to the album.
Let's go over to you, Lonnie.
Yeah, "Do You Love Me" is just the perfect way to end Kiss's masterpiece from '76. It's what Julian was saying. It's Paul Stanley. Paul Stanley wrote two songs about himself, I guess, essentially for the album. And even though Gene took one, even though Bob gave one to Gene, Gene made it, and they made it. Gene didn't make it his own. They made it Gene's own. But "Do You Love Me" is a great song. And what Julian was saying, you read Paul's book from a couple years ago, you really kind of you put yourself where Paul Stanley was in 1976 with his insecurities. Even though being the rock star that he was, you can really hear where Paul was coming from a personal standpoint. So, but it's a fantastic song. I love the bridge, like Ken was saying, and I love the way that they had that coda ending, that the way they've been playing it since the reunion tour too, with the guitar riffs at the end. And James, you're the one to answer this. Then, was that how the song was supposed to end on Destroyer? Because I don't know if you guys have heard that there's rumor that the guitar ending that they've done since '96 was how the song was originally going to end, and they scrapped that and went with the bells and that how it ends on the album. Is that true, or have you ever heard that before, or do you think I'm making that up right now?
I haven't heard it, but I know that Bob was very insistent on putting the bell. No, maybe that is true. I hadn't heard it, and Bob was very insistent on putting the bells in. Again, he knew it was going to be the last song, and he wanted to give it a real rousing ending there. And Paul is very effusive, I believe, in his autobiography, where he says the bells is one of his favorite things on a Kiss record. Towards the end of that, so I don't know if they did have. I haven't even heard the other version. That I guess I have to listen to that. I don't know about that version that you're talking about.
Yeah, they do this. You guys, Julian, Ken, you guys know what I'm talking about. The guitar outro, how they do it when they play it live now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love that.
That's really cool. So I wonder if that was ever where did they come up with that in '96? That, hey, this is how we're going to end the song now, or if I've heard rumors that that's how they thought about ending it back in '76.
I don't know.
Maybe Tommy was in the wings with some bells, and they said, "Nah, we'll come up with something else, Tommy."
Bells.
Wow.
Coffee mugs going.
No.
All right,
there's
that's enough of that.
there's one song
I love
left,
Tom.
and I went out of order there. Beth, and I love Beth. I smile every time I see that damn commercial now.
Great commercial.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
great.
Because that and it's the second commercial to feature Beth. If you remember a few years ago, they did like the telephone acting out of the Beth phone call in a commercial, and I can't remember what it was. I mean, that's just so badass. This is Peter Criss's moment. The song that saved Kiss in so many ways. I mean, it's impossible to get past, that, the song had a quite a long history at that point, but, the importance of this song to the band just makes me smile every time I have to sit through all 2 minutes and 35 seconds of it. Not totally my cup of tea, but it makes me smile. So, James, Beth.
Yeah, I think it's a masterwork. And getting back to Bob again, without keeping driving the nail home. Obviously, this is his classical training and musical training coming to the fore and writing a song. All the different chord changes in there, the key changes, completely classically based, something anybody in Kiss would not have even thought of. But also because I love Only Women Bleed. I love I Never Cry. I keep getting back to the whole Alice Cooper thing, but I love those songs. I love You and Me or No Superstar. I really do. I really do. I love those songs. I love the fact that Alice is this big, bad, crazy man and then has that tender side, which was what Bob was going towards. But I love those songs, and I love Beth because of that. It's a great musical song. And as I said before, I like any kind of music that touches me or it's good music. So it doesn't necessarily have to be rock music or pop music or disco, whatever it is. If it's a good song, I'm willing to say it is. And that song has obviously stood the test of time.
Would this song have jumped out at Ezrin when he heard it? I mean, I don't know how it was presented to him, in reality. Did Peter kind of sneak it to him and said, "Hey, Bob, I've got a song," and what would his initial impression? Would he just have said, "Oh yeah, totally," it's one of these songs that's so out of character that you've got to do it?
Well, he was desperate. He told me desperate because, as you know, we didn't talk about it, but the Ain't None of Your Business, they tried to record something for Peter. He said we needed a Peter song. They kept saying there's a Peter song on every record. We need like the old Ringo, where there's a Ringo song on every Beatle record. So, and when the story goes that I believe in Flint, Michigan, Gene and Peter, and now I've later learned because I worked with Lydia getting photographs for the book that she told me she was in that limo ride. And it's funny now, 4 people now claim to have named Beck Beth, or Beth, the song Beth. But she claims she came up with Beth when there was like, we can't call this Beck. And that Gene said, well, we need a song for you. And Bob is doing Great Expectations for me. And that's the ballad, as Ken mentioned. Why don't you bring it to him? And they sung it to him a cappella. And then he gave him the tape of the Chelsea tape of Sam Pendridge, which we should mention, who co-wrote it with Beth, with Peter. And Bob heard it all. He was, first of all, relieved. Oh, good, we have a song. And then he said he had to stroke everybody's ego and say, okay, bring it back, even though he knew it was good. What do you guys think of this? And then they were like, oh, great, we got a Peter song. Let's move on with the rest of the record. Nobody thought it was going to be what it was. So Bob was very, very relieved.
Well, Paul Stanley's probably like, thank God I don't have to give up another song.
Good point.
Ken.
Beth, it was not my favorite song, but the first time I heard it, it wasn't even on the radio. I don't remember hearing it on the radio until I heard it on, heard it on album first. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good song, a good melody. Again, not my favorite song on the album, but it's good, and I actually rather have the like the acoustic type version of the song, like they did the Phantom of the Park thing, for example, acoustic kind of thing. The orchestration is cool. I like it, but I do like more stripped down to guitars. acoustically. But hey, it's a good song. You can't complain too much about it.
I think I finally know who the guitarist is on that, and I'm not saying anything else.
Oh,
you
come
do.
on. You do? Because we talked about that the first time. No, because Dick
Yeah.
Wagner swears it wasn't him.
Yeah,
It will be revealed, right?
His first name is John.
Lennon.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to say, before Lonnie goes, real quick, because Ken just reminded me, that middle part to Beth, with that beautiful, like the strings kind of take off, even though I named all these songs, Bob said that's the closest to Years Ago and to Steven on Welcome to My Nightmare, that really eerie thing. That scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. Because I got that when I was like 10, 11 years old. I couldn't be in the same room when that was playing. And I told Alice that when I was interviewing him for the book, and he was just like, that is so funny. But anyway, I was going to say that, and Bob also said that he used the same sort of progression for the string parts for Comfortably Numb. So he said, it's amazing that people never notice that. I put a lot of the same stuff in all these albums. So again, that connects all those things before, yeah.
Bob obviously knows what works, and he's found a certain formula in that period that was able to translate from Alice Cooper to Kiss to Pink Floyd. So, that's what makes him so successful, is that he knew what to use, and he had a bag of tricks that he could apply, across the board, really. So, that's part of being brilliant. Lonnie, talking about brilliant.
Thank you. When I first heard Beth, I can go back to, again, being in my brother's room and listening to like cassette of Destroyer and hearing Beth and thinking, well, this doesn't really, what is this all of a sudden? It sounds like something Mom and Dad would listen to all of a sudden on here. We were listening to Shout It Out Loud, and we're listening to Flaming Youth and, Detroit Rock City, and all of a sudden we got these strings and this, guy crying that he's not coming home to his wife or whatever. Like, what's going on here? I can really, remember being in my brother's room and hearing that and thinking, Beth, fast forward, let's get to Do You Love Me, and then we'll flip it over to back to Detroit Rock City. But it's obviously it's what saved, Julian, you said it, it's what saved Kiss, it's what saved Destroyer, it's what propelled Destroyer from what could have been a failure to the album that everything is compared to from that day, maybe not from that day forward, but especially after they had seen the sustained success of Destroyer, they always tried to compare any new album coming out to Destroyer. And it all goes back to Beth made the album successful. It was ready to tank, and it propelled it back on the charts. You guys were saying by the time they appeared on the Paul Lynde special, Rock and Roll Over was already out because they had already hit the panic button, and they had said that we're going back in another direction. We're going more in the vein of Dress to Kill, just straight ahead rock, because this isn't working. But Beth saved the album and put it in the stratosphere that people think of Kiss, and without it, Kiss could have been one of those bands like, hey, remember that band Kiss that was around only for a couple of years? They had that success with that live album. Whatever happened to those guys? Because they couldn't sustain it. So, again, I said it early on, Peter Criss, you got to tip your hat to him on this album for his drumming and for his contribution, although Paul Stanley wants to downplay it in his book that if, you can do it once, you can do it again. But you got to tip your hat to Peter Criss for maybe to echo something else. Maybe Peter Criss saved Kiss.
And listen, what Lonnie's saying, I will say this about what Lonnie just touched upon a very key point, and that is let's give props to Kiss. Okay, they really bought into what I call the act in the book. But really what I'm saying is they didn't care. They were Kiss. They weren't interested in being a hard rock band or this band. They're Kiss. So they did what they wanted. And what guts. Can you imagine what Lonnie's saying, and this was years later, can you imagine if you grew up, if you were 13, 14, younger than I was, when you listened to the first album, the second album, the third album, Alive, Black Diamond, Cold Gin, these rocking songs, Macho, Balls Out, Cock Rock, and then this comes on. Can you imagine the guts it was to put that on the record and then put it out and stand behind it? And they had to do it, and they did. they did stand behind it. And for Scott Shannon to make it a single, and nobody even knew it was Kiss, and for it to catapult. But I really think props has to go to Kiss to have that kind of guts. I don't think, aside from Alice Cooper, and that's Bob again, but not a lot of people put ballads. That whole idea of the power ballad wasn't until the 80s, but these were the first power ballads. A really gutsy thing 40 years ago for Kiss to do right in the middle of this hard rock audience that they were creating. A really gutsy thing to do.
And this is right in the middle of stadium rock era, isn't it? I mean, when you think
Right.
about, Aerosmith hadn't put out any real, ballads. They tried Dream On early on in their career, and that was pretty much it for their time. But, it was just heavy, hairy guerrilla music for the most part, and here's a very polished piece of music. I think the saddest thing is how they ran away from it. Rock and Roll Over, obviously, is a complete 180 back to the pre-Kiss, and maybe they couldn't do it again because of the amount of effort that it had taken to really, they probably put Peter Criss through hell. Ace probably went through hell and didn't, enjoy it. And Gene and Paul, I bet Bob made them raise their game exponentially to what they'd been doing before. He had them thinking about all sorts of aspects of the creation of music and songcraft that they had never considered. Yeah. So maybe it's just one of those things that it's a once-in-a-career sort of album, and that's what makes it so special in the catalog. I mean, not only is it their most successful, it's also highly accessible, and, it's so varied that you get, like you said, Beth, who would have thought that's Kiss? Well, apart from the fact that it isn't Kiss, it's Peter Criss and an orchestra. But
Julian, you touched on that they didn't want to go back to it because Peter went through hell. Ace went through hell trying to get this album done. It could have been something they were thinking even when they were in the process of recording that. When we're done with this, we're not doing this again because this is crazy what this guy is making us go through. With like the boot camps, and we're going back to what we know because this is too, especially for maybe Ace and Peter, this is too much effort. This is just ridiculous. This guy's out of his mind even because they went right back to Rock and Roll Over with Eddie Kramer after that.
Yeah, but they're also settled at Casablanca. Don't forget all the things that had held up the recording of this album have now been resolved. They've got a clean, fresh contract. They're set for the next few years. They've got extremely good terms. They've got the key man clause in that contract, so they're tied to Casablanca all the way through to 1980 when, Polygram buys out Bogart. So, they're settled. Do they now need to make a strong artistic statement?
No, that's no question. Everything you guys are saying is exactly right. I think the great myth of Destroyer is that because, and it's true, there was backlash among the rock press, specifically Cream and Circus Magazine, which had always backed him. I mean, Rolling Stone was going to hate him anyway. And a lot of the fans had heard, just through the grapevine before the record even came out, that there were strings on it and a calliope and a choir. But I'll say the reason why Kiss did not work with Bob Ezrin again is simply because Peter and Ace had been fried. They didn't want to do exactly what Lonnie said, to work that hard again. They'd already made it. And they could pretty much put out an album with a bass drum and a kazoo, and people were going to buy it. They already had made it, and they really did lay back on the laurels, and I think to their own detriment. But we have this one piece of wonderful Americana rock history or history that is one and off, and I love the fact that it has a mystery around it, and it's a one-shot deal. But I think they all panicked, and even Paul says in his memoir, we didn't want people blowing whistles in our face anymore. We were done with that.
Yeah, and to a certain degree, the statistics and sales figures after that, they're coasting downhill. So this is the high point. I mean, I'm looking at an audit of the record shipments from June 79, and 2.5 million copies of Destroyer had been shipped by that point, and 1.9 million copies of Rock and Roll Over, 1.8 million. So there's your trend starting. Obviously, the other albums hadn't been out as long, but you also see that reflected in the SoundScan figures, for the post-91 period. So, they reached a plateau here to a certain extent. And we're not going to go into talk about the tour, but, I mean, the tour is also very reflective of that, in that Glickman and Marx are firmly entrenched. They're doing an analysis of their whole touring operation, which up to that point had been homebrew. And, God bless the original Kiss crew for the work that they did on the road, 73 through, Europe 76. But after that, it became a very professional oriented business, with everything choreographed and timed. And that's maybe where, like Lonnie said, you listen to a lot of the shows after the live period, and that spark's gone. So I think we see a lot of this is a magical period for the band, but one that perhaps wasn't as fully appreciated by them at the time because of the backlash against them.
Right, and it showed the divisions in the band. It started to show those divisions that were always kind of there. That, Ace and Peter on one side, and Paul and Gene on the other side. Sure.
Well, let's wrap up with some final thoughts on this album. And James, I'm just going to hand it over to you. As the album celebrates 40 years, what is your one track? You're allowed to take one song from this album with you, and one MVP.
Well, of course, we're going to go with Bob again. I'll go finally in Detroit Rock City. I did want to, for the purposes of history, and I did this with the Kiss My Wax guys, but I wanted to show my album from 1976, the original one that I pulled out that I described in the book with the great thing and the lyrics on there. And the first, as Ken mentioned, the Shout It Out Loud and the Kiss Army Shield, done by Vinny DiGirolando, is a great guy, lives here in Jersey. And I also wanted to make this point. If anybody has this, you should get it. Fan of this record. This is the best vinyl version of this. Yeah. This is the most amazing sounding. I cracked this out about 2 months ago just on a whim to play for some people who are like, hey, I read your book, but I haven't heard Destroyer. Okay, sit down. And I played this. It's amazingly good. It's a 200 gram Obi Japanese mix. I paid like $100 for this about like 8 years ago when I first started thinking about doing the book. And it's just, if you have a chance to get this, it's much cheaper now on eBay. Please do. Those are the two things I wanted to at least show today and to bring back memories of Destroyer. But Detroit Rock City and my friend Bob Ezrin.
Lonnie.
I think we all have to say that Bob Ezrin is the MVP of this album. So seeing what was presented in the fall of '75 and seeing what came out in March of '76 with the album. So Bob is definitely the MVP of the album. And again, I'm going to echo Peter Criss and his drumming and song Beth for what he did for the album. And we were saying earlier that we were stroking Bob's ego, and Bob should listen to this if he wants to have a good pick-me-up on a bad day. But also, in light of some comments from earlier in the week, I think Kanye West should sit down and listen to us sing Bob Ezrin's praises as well.
Yeah, I think Kanye probably needs to pick up a very small chunk of Bob's discography. I'd recommend The Wall, Destroyer, and Billy
Gabriel album. Yeah. First Peter Gabriel album is great.
Yeah, or Berlin. Hell, I mean, come on.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point.
Alice Cooper.
Yeah, and any of those. I mean, Bob's done some incredible work. So Kanye obviously didn't know who he was, but as we've seen lately on TMZ, Paul McCartney can't get into certain after parties either. So, there's no respect for the elders anymore.
Hey, Kanye West needs an accountant. He doesn't need to be coming about the producers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
he needs a decent accountant.
The last of his problems is Bob Ezrin's opinion of him. Ken, final thoughts.
Great album. If you're a Kiss fan, you should have this in your collection. If not, you better go buy it. Most valuable player again is Bob Ezrin. And I guess the song I would take away would be probably Detroit Rock City.
Yep, I'm with you guys on that. Detroit Rock City for me, and Bob Ezrin as the MVP for what he did for the band. So who knows what the future will hold. So everyone out there, listening, chime in on our Facebook page, on the FAQ board, or wherever you happen to see this. Let us know what your favorite song is off this album, who you think the MVP is off the album, or even, if you think any of those other Magnographic demos would have been worthy of being worked on, or maybe, that barrel was pretty well scraped. So, happy birthday to Destroyer. I think it's the one album hopefully everyone's going to play repeatedly over the next month, pick up James's book, Shout It Out Loud, and you'll get the full backstory to the album, with a lot of great interviews and quotes from the people who are around making it. So, we said it before, James, when I spoke to you myself, great book, absolutely fantastic work. Love the, it's a different style of writing than most Kiss books are written in, and I found it really entertaining to see it written from a different sort of voice. So, great work on that book, and, hopefully, we'll continue to see some great features on your Facebook page, because you've been really good on that side of things as well.
Thank you all. This has been a real pleasure. I'm so glad to be able to celebrate this with you guys, and Julian, right back at you. I'm looking forward to your new book coming out soon, and I watch these podcasts all the time. You guys are fantastic. Really, it's so entertaining. I'll watch it during lunch, and it's just, it's great. Keep up the great work, and I hope KISS really commemorates this. I'm sure they will if they have a chance to make a buck or throw something up there, but they really should commemorate this correctly, because it's a huge part of their career, and an album that I have very few people. I thought more people would push back on me on this, but so many people really do love this album. They hold it close to their heart, so KISS should do that more often, I think.
And they've heard some of those stories today, so we thank you all for listening to us. Ken, James, Lonnie, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you all on the next episode on the board or on Facebook. So take care, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we broadcast today. We hope to see you again.